picture this scenario. You're sitting across from someone in a coffee shop.
Right. Or, maybe dialing into a high-stakes virtual meeting.
Yeah, exactly. And you have spent literally hundreds of hours studying for this exact moment.
Oh, yeah. The endless flashcards?
Right. You possess this massive mental library of the subject matter. You've drilled the vocabulary until your eyes watered. You understand all the intricate grammar rules on paper. But then the person across from you asks a question.
And it's your turn to speak.
And suddenly your palms start sweating. Your heart rate spikes. You reach into that massive mental library to pull out a single sentence. And well, the door is locked.
The librarian is completely gone.
Exactly. Your brain has initiated a total catastrophic freeze.
It's a profound physiological betrayal, honestly.
That's a great way to put it.
Because you can physically feel the disconnect happening in real time. Like the knowledge exists within your neural networks, right?
Yeah.
But the retrieval mechanism has completely collapsed under the pressure of the moment.
And that feeling, that locked door, is exactly what we are tearing apart today.
Yes.
We're taking a deep dive into the architecture of that brain freeze, and more importantly, how to permanently dismantle it.
Which is crucial for you, the learner.
Right. We're looking at the fascinating mechanics of training the human brain to not merely store information like some, dusty encyclopedia, but to actively think, process, and speak in a completely new language.
Specifically, English in this context.
Yep. And our guiding material for this deep dive is a comprehensive dialogue between two advanced language educators, John and Emma.
And they bypass the standard, textbook advice. They dig straight into the microscopic daily behavioral shifts that actually rewire the brain for fluency.
Yeah, their entire philosophy centers on a concept that completely flips our standard assumptions.
I mean, most of us assume that fluid communication is just the result of some innate magical talent.
Right, like you're either born with it or you're not.
Exactly. But John and Emma argue the exact opposite. What's fascinating here is that they frame fluency purely as a byproduct of strategic, gentle, and highly specific daily conditioning.
Which means the insights we're pulling from their discussion go way beyond just language acquisition.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even if you're not actively learning a language right now, the mechanics we're going to explore govern how we build any complex cognitive habit.
Yeah, we're looking at the neurology of overcoming the fear of failure, the literal physical conditioning of our muscles.
And how to stop treating everyday interactions as if they were a terrifying university final exam.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to set up the first major trap John and Emma identify because it perfectly explains that coffee shop brain freeze we just talked about.
The translation trap.
Yes, the translation trap. And when they break down what is actually happening inside the head of a learner, the exhaustion makes complete sense.
It really does. The translation trap is perhaps the most universal bottleneck. The educators point out this tragic irony. You can have a student who possesses an incredibly deep, sophisticated knowledge of English grammar.
Yeah.
And if you hand them a written exam, they will score a perfect 100%.
But drop that same student into a live conversation.
They hit a concrete wall.
Because they aren't actually having a conversation in English.
No, they're not.
They are running a grueling 4-step manufacturing process for every single sentence.
Right, let's break that down. Step 1, the other person speaks, and you capture the English audio.
Step 2, you mentally drag that English sentence into your native language just to understand it.
Step 3, you figure out your reply, but you build it in your native language.
And finally, step 4, you painstakingly translate your native language reply back into English before you finally push the words out of your mouth.
And by the time you reach step 4, the conversational window has completely closed.
The other person has already moved on to a completely different topic.
Exactly. And you are left holding a perfectly translated sentence that is now entirely irrelevant.
It makes me think of trying to run like a PlayStation 2 game on a modern computer using a software emulator.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. The computer might be incredibly powerful, but the emulator is a massive bottleneck.
Because it has to translate the code.
Exactly. It has to take the unique code of the game, translate it into an entirely different architecture that the computer's processor can understand, render the frame, and then push it to the screen.
Which takes a massive amount of power.
The computational overhead is enormous. The system maxes out its processing power just to translate the environment, and the frame rate drops to 0.
Yeah, the game just freezes.
That is what is happening in the brain. Your brain says execute communication, and the translation emulator says insufficient memory, system crash.
That emulator analogy captures the biological reality perfectly. When you run information through the filter of your native language, you are demanding an unsustainable amount of cognitive processing power.
Because the brain only has so much energy, right?
Exactly. The brain runs on glucose. When you engage in that four-step translation cycle, your prefrontal cortex is burning through its energy reserves at an astonishing rate.
Wow.
This is why John and Emma point out that learners feel physically exhausted after just 5 minutes of small talk.
Literally physically exhausted. Emma actually has a brilliant line in the source material where she asks, why is buying bread a university exam?
Yes, I love that line.
Because when you're stuck in the translation emulator, going to a bakery requires the same mental caloric burn as taking a calculus final.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Okay, go ahead.
Isn't translation how we have to start learning anything new? I mean, we need a reference point, don't we? If someone points to a piece of fruit and says apple, I have no idea what that sound means unless I mentally map it to the word for apple in my native language.
Sure.
I need that crutch to bridge the gap, right?
Well, in the absolute infancy of learning a language, yes. Mapping a new sound to an existing concept is a natural reflex.
Right.
But the danger arises when the learner refuses to let go of that crutch long after the initial introduction.
Ah, okay.
John and Emma are adamant that to achieve any true momentum, you must eventually sever the tie to your native language entirely. You have to establish what they call direct contact.
Direct contact, meaning the emulator is completely uninstalled.
Yes. The goal of direct contact is to link the new auditory signal, the word apple, directly to the visual cortex.
Okay.
To the sensory memory of the object itself. So when you hear apple, you should not see the letters of your native language spelling out the translation in your mind's eye.
Right, you shouldn't see text.
Exactly. You should instantly conjure the image of the round physical fruit, the crunch of biting into it, the taste.
You bypass the text completely and go straight to the physical reality.
Because the physical reality does not require translation. If you skip the native language middleman, the cognitive load drops dramatically.
That makes so much sense.
Buying bread stops being a calculus exam and goes back to being a simple exchange of goods, because your brain isn't trying to render two different linguistic environments simultaneously.
Okay, so if the goal is to kill the emulator and establish this direct contact with reality, how do we actually do that? Because the brain is stubborn.
Very stubborn.
It wants to use the native language because it's comfortable. John and Emma suggest that forcing this shift requires a complete environmental reset.
Yes, an environmental reset.
But their approach to this reset is surprisingly, well, microscopic.
It is microscopic by design. A massive pitfall for ambitious learners is attempting to establish direct contact with highly abstract concepts immediately.
Like trying to run before you can walk.
Exactly. They want to sit down in a cafe and debate macroeconomic policy, or explain the nuances of their political beliefs, or discuss the meaning of life on their very first day of trying to think exclusively in English.
Which is guaranteed to crash the system again because abstract concepts don't have a physical shape you can easily visualize.
Right.
You can't picture the physical form of existentialism the way you can picture an apple.
Precisely why John and Emma insist on pulling the focus all the way back to the immediate tangible environment. They suggest starting with the room you're sitting in.
Your morning breakfast.
Your immediate physical needs.
The examples they give are almost comically simple. We're talking about internal monologues like, I'm tired, I need water.
I need to brush my teeth.
Yeah, and Emma brings up what they call the ultimate international sentence, where are my keys?
I mean, we've all been there. And the simplicity is the entire point. Sentences like, where are my keys or I need water requires zero abstract rendering.
Right.
You are binding the English vocabulary directly to an immediate, urgent physical reality.
They highlight this technique of real-time narration. John describes standing in his kitchen and just narrating his coffee routine out loud as it happens. He's just saying, I'm boiling water, I'm making coffee, the coffee smells good.
Because real-time narration forces the brain to synchronize the action with the vocabulary in the exact moment it occurs.
It ties it together.
It is the most efficient way to build the direct contact we just discussed.
I understand the neurology behind it, I really do. But let's be honest about the practical application here.
Okay.
Walking around an empty apartment, talking to yourself out loud about boiling water, It feels completely unhinged.
It does feel a bit silly.
It feels utterly ridiculous. Doesn't it feel incredibly silly to do that?
Well, it feels ridiculous because we associate speaking aloud when alone with, a loss of social filter.
Right, like you're losing it a little bit.
But John and Emma openly embrace the absurdity of it. In fact, Emma shares a deeply relatable anecdote about standing in her kitchen, having a full out-loud debate with herself about whether or not to eat another cookie.
Oh, I loved that part. She's just like, do you need another cookie? Probably not. Maybe yes.
It's a funny visual, but there's a strategic reason she's doing that in the kitchen, completely alone, rather than trying to practice her English at a crowded party.
Because the kitchen is a safe zone.
Exactly. Linguists refer to it as a safe zone. When you're debating a cookie with yourself, the social stakes are mathematically zero.
Right. There's no native speaker waiting impatiently for you to finish your sentence.
There's no one judging your conjugation of the verb.
And when there is no judgment, the anxiety just disappears.
Which is neurologically critical. In language acquisition theory, there is a concept known as the affective filter.
The affective filter.
Yeah. You can think of it as a defensive wall erected by the amygdala.
The brain's threat detection center, right?
Exactly. When you feel anxious, embarrassed, or socially threatened, the amygdala activates and literally reroutes metabolic resources away from the prefrontal cortex.
Wow.
It shuts down the language processing centers because it believes you are in physical danger.
That is fascinating. So the brain freeze in the coffee shop isn't just you forgetting a word. It's your brain treating a native speaker like a literal predator and shutting down your vocabulary to prepare you to run away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The affective filter goes up, and no language can get in or out.
Wow.
By practicing in the isolated safe zone of the kitchen, narrating the coffee making, the affective filter remains completely lowered.
Your brain is relaxed.
Yes, which allows the neural pathways connecting the English words to the physical actions to form quickly and deeply.
Okay, so the private environment is crucial. But John shares another anecdote that shows how fragile this private practice can be if you aren't disciplined about it.
Oh, the cleaning story.
Yes. He talks about waking up on a weekend with massive motivation. He decides he's going to spend the whole day thinking in English while organizing his messy room.
A classic burst of unstructured ambition.
Right, we've all done it. He starts out strong, picking things up, naming them, desk, book. But within 20 minutes, he finds an old photograph. Then he finds a movie ticket stub. And finally, he unearths an old, unopened snack from the back of a drawer.
And it's over.
It's totally over. His brain completely abandons the English practice, and he just sits there looking at the snack, entirely derailed.
Emma's response to this story is honestly one of the most practical pieces of advice in the entire dialogue.
It's so good.
She says, do not train your brain with old snacks from your drawer.
It's a great metaphor. Don't let your environment hijack your cognitive load.
Right.
But this brings up a logistical problem. Naming static objects in a clean room, desk, chair, window, it's a good starting point, but a room doesn't move.
Communication is dynamic.
Exactly. If we master the static objects, how do we introduce momentum without overwhelming the system again?
That is where John and Emma introduce the highly structured architecture of the 5-minute mental workout.
The 5-minute workout.
Yes. They transition the learner from simply observing the environment to actively engaging with time and narrative.
And they are incredibly rigid about the time frame. They argue that practicing for 5 to 10 minutes every single day is infinitely more effective than sitting down for a brutal 4-hour study session on a Sunday afternoon.
The biological mechanism behind this is neuroplasticity, specifically a process called myelination.
Myelination, okay.
When you practice thinking in English, electrical signals travel down the axons of your neurons. If you only practice once a week for 4 hours, the brain treats that as an anomaly.
It's just a weird event.
Right.
Right.
But if you fire those specific neural pathways for 5 minutes every single day, specialized cells called oligodendrocytes recognize the frequency.
And they respond to that frequency.
Yes. They respond by wrapping the axon in a fatty white tissue called myelin.
So it's literally building physical insulation around the thought process.
Precisely. Myelin acts like the rubber insulation on a copper wire. It prevents the electrical signal from leaking and drastically increases the speed at which the vocabulary is retrieved.
That is incredible.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, myelination responds to the frequency of the signal, not the duration of a marathon session.
It's just like lifting weights.
Exactly.
If you go to the gym once a month and bench press for 6 hours, you aren't going to build muscle.
No, you're just going to injure yourself.
You're just going to tear your connective tissue and be in absolute agony. Muscle synthesis requires frequent, consistent, manageable stress.
Yes.
So let's look at the actual routine they use for this 5-minute daily workout. They break it down into 4 distinct levels of progressive overload.
Right. Level 1 is the baseline we just covered. Naming static objects.
Desk, chair.
You look around and construct the simplest possible reality. This is my desk. My desk is messy. My notebook is open.
You're building the nouns and the basic adjectives,
Yeah.
and then you immediately push to level 2.
Which introduces movement and intention, naming actions and plans.
Like, I am checking my messages. Or, later, I am meeting a friend.
Notice the subtle shift in cognitive demand there. We have moved from the present state of an object to the present continuous tense of an action.
Right.
And we've introduced the concept of the immediate future. But because the vocabulary is still anchored to the immediate reality of the learner's day, it avoids the trap of abstract translation.
Which perfectly sets up level 3, where things get really interesting.
Chronological storytelling.
Yes. You take the actions and you chain them together in the order they happen. I wake up at 7 brown, I wash my face, I make breakfast. At lunch, I eat rice and vegetables.
It builds a sequence.
Exactly. Let's actually pause here for a second. If you're listening to this right now, try to actively engage with this mechanism. Think about the first hour of your morning routine today.
How much of it could you describe simply right now?
Right, out loud, in chronological order, using the absolute simplest words possible in the language you're trying to learn.
The brilliance of level 3 is that it forces the brain to intertwine the abstract concept of time with specific linguistic structures.
Because daily routines use high-frequency language.
Exactly. The verbs and transitions we use constantly. By drilling a chronological narrative, you are building the mental scaffolding for storytelling.
You're learning how to sequence events, even if the events are just making toast and drinking coffee.
Yep.
And then we reach level 4, which is where the real cognitive heavy lifting begins. Expanding the sentence.
Expanding the reasoning.
Right. You take a simple level 2 or level 3 fact, like I go to work, and you stretch it. I go to work by bus because it is cheap.
Adding the word because is a massive neurological leap.
Oh, really?
Yes. You are no longer just observing reality. You are analyzing causality. You are providing reasoning.
But you're attaching it to a simple foundation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you are attaching that complex reasoning to a very simple, heavily myelinated foundational sentence, the brain can handle the extra load without the emulator crashing.
It is brilliant progressive scaffolding.
It really is.
But, and there is a massive psychological catch here.
Always a catch.
As you move from pointing at a desk to explaining why you take the bus, the complexity of the sentences grows. And as complexity grows, the mathematical probability of making a mistake skyrockets.
Naturally.
Which brings us to the single biggest psychological roadblock John and Emma discuss: the paralyzing, visceral fear of looking foolish in front of other human beings.
It's huge.
Yeah.
The fear of losing social status through incompetence is a profound evolutionary barrier. We are hardwired to want to appear capable to our tribe.
John tells a story that perfectly encapsulates why we are so terrified of making errors. It is a classic linguistic nightmare.
Oh, the board story.
Yes. He was trying to express to a group of people that he felt no interest in a particular situation. He intended to say, "I'm bored." But he used the wrong suffix, and instead he proudly announced, "I'm boring."
A single morphological error, but a catastrophic shift in meaning.
I mean, think about the absolute horror of that. Instead of saying, "I require stimulation," he introduced himself by saying, "I am a human sedative."
I cause everyone around me to lose interest in life.
Right. And the person he was talking to had to gently look at him and say, "No, John, you're not."
It is deeply uncomfortable. But John and Emma's analysis of this specific kind of mistake is where their methodology becomes truly counterintuitive.
Okay. How so?
They argue that making that specific, highly embarrassing mistake is actually a neurological superpower.
Okay, I am going to need you to unpack that, because social humiliation does not sound like a superpower to me.
It sounds terrible.
It sounds like the exact trauma that causes the effective filter to slam shut. How does public embarrassment help you learn?
Well, we have to differentiate between genuine trauma and a sharp spike of emotional friction.
Okay.
When John accidentally called himself a human sedative and received that immediate, slightly humorous correction from his friend, his brain experienced a rapid spike in emotion.
He felt surprised.
He felt surprise, a jolt of embarrassment, and likely some awkward amusement.
His heart rate definitely jumped.
Yes. And from a neurochemical perspective, emotion acts as a powerful adhesive for memory.
Super clue.
Exactly. When a piece of information is tagged with a strong emotional response, the amygdala signals the hippocampus, the brain's memory center, to store that specific data point deeply and permanently.
Wow.
The friction of the mistake and the emotion of the correction locked the difference between bored and boring into John's brain in a way that reading a grammar chart never could.
That makes total sense. I guarantee John will be on his deathbed 50 years from now, and he will still vividly remember the distinction between those two words.
He absolutely will.
The slight burn of the embarrassment myelinated that pathway instantly.
Precisely. Which leads John and Emma to their core thesis regarding fear. Making mistakes is not the enemy of fluency.
Silence is the enemy.
Yes, silence is the absolute worst outcome.
Emma uses a phrase that I honestly think should be printed on the cover of every language textbook in the world.
What is it?
Say more, fear less.
It's perfect. Because if you choose silence, because you are waiting for your internal software to perfectly render the grammar before you open your mouth, you are starving your brain of the friction it requires to grow.
You're denying the hippocampus the emotional tags.
Exactly. You are denying it the tags it needs to build long-term memory.
Emma literally says in the source material, if you wait until you feel perfect to start speaking, you will be waiting until the year 3000.
Perfection is a mirage.
It doesn't exist. You have to be willing to stumble into the friction.
So if we accept that the emulator must go, that we must start small in our safe zones, and that we must actively court the friction of embarrassing mistakes,
Right.
we are still missing a crucial piece of the puzzle.
We are, because conquering the psychological fear is really only half the battle. Let's say my mindset is flawless.
Okay?
I'm unafraid of mistakes. I know my daily routine. But when I actually try to push the air out of my lungs and vibrate my vocal cords, my tongue feels like it weighs 10 pounds.
The physical disconnect.
Yes, I stutter, I pause, and the words come out sounding thick and unnatural. What is the physical disconnect happening there?
This is where John and Emma make a vital pivot. They argue that learners fundamentally misunderstand what communication is.
How so?
We treat language as a purely intellectual academic exercise. But speaking out loud is fundamentally a complex physical sport.
A physical sport?
Yes. Think about silent study. You sit in a chair, reading a complex article in English, quietly to yourself. Your visual cortex is processing the symbols, your prefrontal cortex is parsing the meaning, and internally, your monologue sounds flawless.
Oh, I relate to this so deeply. When I read a difficult text silently, I feel like a sophisticated intellectual.
Right.
The pacing in my head is absolutely perfect, but the second I try to open my mouth and explain the concepts I just read to someone else, the illusion shatters.
The mouth won't cooperate.
Not at all. I'm stumbling, I'm repeating prepositions, I sound like I'm malfunctioning.
And that malfunction happens because silent reading does absolutely zero to train the motor cortex.
The muscles.
Exactly. To produce the specific, unfamiliar phonetic sounds of a new language, your diaphragm, your vocal cords, your tongue, your lips, and your jaw all have to coordinate with millisecond precision.
Wow.
If you only read silently, those articulatory muscles literally lack the physical conditioning to move in those new patterns.
So how do we put our mouths through physical therapy? How do we build that muscle memory?
John and Emma introduce a technique that sounds intense. They call it shadowing.
Shadowing. Okay, explain that.
Shadowing is a highly active form of physical conditioning. The methodology is straightforward but demanding.
Yeah.
You take a short piece of native audio,
Like a podcast.
a snippet from a podcast, a scene from a television show, or a dedicated audio lesson. You listen to a sentence, and you immediately repeat it out loud, trying to act as the speaker's vocal shadow.
But I want to push back on this a bit.
Sure.
If I am just blindly repeating an audio clip of someone else speaking, aren't I just going to sound like a weird robotic parrot? I don't want to sound like an audiobook narrator, I want to sound like myself.
You are not shadowing to steal their personality. You are shadowing to absorb the physical mechanics of the language.
The mechanics.
Yes. John and Emma emphasize that the goal isn't just to pronounce the vocabulary correctly. The goal is to aggressively match the original speaker's exact speed, their breathing rhythm, the way they link words together, and where they place the stress on specific syllables.
You're matching the music of it.
Exactly. You are mimicking the underlying music, the prosody of the language.
And the source material is brutally honest about the initial experience of trying this. When you first attempt to shadow a native speaker, you will sound horrendous.
It will be an exercise in absolute chaos.
Complete chaos. John notes that your mouth will feel entirely out of sync. You'll speak too fast, then you'll lag behind, you will bite your tongue, and you will drop entire words because your articulatory muscles simply cannot keep up with the tempo.
It's exhausting.
But the promise is that if you endure the chaos, you eventually develop what Emma calls a flexible mouth.
A flexible mouth. It's a highly descriptive term.
Yeah.
You are physically stretching the limitations of your muscle memory until the sheer physical effort required to produce those foreign sounds dramatically decreases.
They also recommend a slightly less intense version of this, which is simply reading a short text out loud for 5 minutes a day.
Yes.
And the purpose isn't to perform, but just to notice.
Awareness precedes correction.
Yeah.
When you read aloud, you force the brain to synchronize the visual input with the physical output.
You start to hear the problems.
Right. You begin to notice where your tongue naturally trips, where you hesitate, and which consonant clusters require more physical drilling.
And to truly supercharge this physical awareness, they advocate for a method that is incredibly effective, but universally despised by every human being on Earth.
Oh, yes. Recording yourself speaking.
It is the ultimate crucible for a learner. I genuinely laughed out loud reading this part of the text.
It's so relatable.
Emma describes the deeply humbling experience of hitting record on her phone, speaking for a minute, and then playing the audio back. She listens to her own voice and thinks, who is this tired potato?
The tired potato phenomenon.
That's hilarious.
It perfectly captures the visceral horror of hearing your own disembodied voice, compounded exponentially by the fact that you are struggling in a new language.
Right, you sound incredibly slow, hesitant, and entirely devoid of energy.
It's a painful blow to the ego.
So why do they insist we subject ourselves to the tired potato experience? Why is the recording actually necessary?
Because the brain is a highly unreliable narrator of its own progress during the physical act of speaking.
Unreliable how?
When you are deep in a conversation, your cognitive load is maxed out, managing the vocabulary, the grammar, and the physical muscle movements.
Right.
You literally do not have the spare bandwidth to objectively judge how you sound.
You can't be the player and the referee at the same time.
Exactly. Progress in language, the subtle smoothing of a transition, the clarity of a vowel, a slight reduction in pausing, it's incredibly difficult to feel internally.
But you can hear it.
Yes. It is glaringly obvious when you hear it objectively on a recording. Comparing a recording of yourself from 3 months ago to a recording from today provides undeniable empirical data that you are improving.
Which keeps you motivated.
It's the ultimate antidote to the feeling of being permanently stuck.
Okay, let's pull back and synthesize the architecture we have built so far. We have recognized the massive drain of the translation emulator and committed to direct contact. We are starting small, anchoring our practice to our daily routines in the safe zone of our homes. We understand that emotional friction and mistakes are the superglue for memory, and we are training the physical hardware of our flexible mouths through shadowing and recording.
The engine is built and the chassis is strong.
But an engine cannot run without fuel, and this is where learners experience the final wave of panic. What happens when I am in the middle of a dynamic conversation? My mouth is ready, my fear is low, but I suddenly realize I simply do not possess the specific vocabulary word I need.
The void.
Yeah. How do I keep the entire interaction from collapsing into an awkward silence?
This is the anxiety of the vocabulary gap. Learners operate under the false assumption that true fluency requires a massive encyclopedic database of tens of thousands of complex words.
They think they need to know everything.
They believe that if they encounter a gap in that database, the system crashes.
John and Emma completely dismantle this assumption. They argue that navigating daily fluid communication does not require an academic lexicon at all.
Not even close.
It relies almost entirely on common high-frequency words.
The foundational blocks. Nouns related to food, commonplaces, basic emotional states, and high-utility action verbs.
And the source text makes a powerful assertion here. Clear, simple English is infinitely more effective than clunky, complex English.
Absolutely.
You do not need to construct sentences like a 19th century philosopher to successfully communicate an idea.
But the gap still exists. What is the tactical workaround when you hit a word you genuinely don't know?
Right.
John gives an incredibly elegant example of what linguists call cognitive scaffolding.
Let's hear it.
Let's imagine you are in a kitchen with a native speaker. You want to ask them to turn on the appliance that boils water. But the specific word kettle has completely vanished from your brain.
It's gone. The instinct is to panic, freeze, apologize profusely, and, pull out a dictionary app on your phone.
Which is the worst possible reaction.
Because it kills the vibe.
It instantly assassinates the momentum and the natural rhythm of the human interaction.
Right. So what does John suggest? He says you lean into the simplicity. You use the foundational words you do possess to build a bridge over the gap.
Exactly.
If you lose the word kettle, you don't stop speaking. You simply describe the object. Can you turn on the machine for hot water? Or where is the thing I use to boil water?
This raises an important question. What is the actual utility of language? Is the goal of the interaction to pass a rigid vocabulary exam? Or is the goal to successfully transfer an idea from your brain into someone else's?
It's to transfer the idea.
Yes, the machine for hot water perfectly transfers the idea. The other person knows exactly what appliance you mean. They will likely hand you the kettle. They might even supply the word for you naturally, and the conversation continues without a single moment of awkward dead air.
It is a masterclass in mental agility over rigid memorization. And John and Emma extend this concept of cognitive scaffolding even further with the strategic use of sentence frames.
Sentence frames are essentially linguistic precompiled code.
Oh, I love that connection back to the software analogy. Explain how that works.
When a programmer is building a new application, they don't write every single line of code from scratch to tell the computer how to render a basic button on the screen.
Use a template.
They pull from a library of precompiled code, a template that already works. Sentence frames function the exact same way for the brain.
Instead of trying to build the complex grammatical structure of a sentence word by excruciating word.
Well, in the middle of a conversation, exactly. You use a ready-made pattern.
John gives some great, highly practical examples of these templates. Things like, I usually blank because blank, or I'm trying to blank, but sometimes I blank.
The neurological benefit of a sentence frame is that it drastically slashes the cognitive load. You do not have to expend precious mental energy ensuring the syntax, the preposition, or the word order of the frame is correct.
Because it's already locked in.
The structure is already heavily myelinated in your brain. Your prefrontal cortex only has to work on retrieving the one specific noun or verb needed to fill in the blank.
You bought the pre-built house. You just have to choose the furniture.
That's a great way to put it.
You don't have to pour the concrete foundation every time you want to sit down. And another vital piece of this scaffolding strategy is the deployment of filler phrases.
Filler phrases are the ultimate pressure release valve for a learner.
We're talking about phrases like, let me think about that, or, well, in my opinion, or it really depends.
Consider the alternative.
Yeah.
When a learner is hit with an unexpected question and they need 3 or 4 seconds to formulate an answer, their default reaction is often a wide-eyed, panicked silence.
The deer in the headlights freeze.
Yes.
It makes both the people in the conversation incredibly uncomfortable.
But if you train yourself to immediately deploy a heavily myelinated filler phrase like, that's an interesting point, let me think.
You accomplish 2 critical things simultaneously. First, you secure your position in the turn-taking of the conversation.
You're holding the floor.
Exactly. You signal to the other person that the system hasn't crashed, you are engaged, and you are preparing a response.
And second, you just bought your brain 3 glorious silent seconds to scan your mental library and retrieve the necessary vocabulary without the crushing pressure of dead air.
It is a brilliant hack.
It really is.
And what I think is so crucial to point out here is that even native speakers use filler phrases constantly.
Oh, all the time.
If I ask you a highly complex question right now, you are not going to instantly spit out a perfectly formatted thesis statement.
No, I'll say, well, it depends on how you define the terms.
Exactly. Using filler phrases makes you sound more authentic, not less.
It replicates the natural, slightly messy rhythm of authentic human thought.
To keep the vocabulary accessible for those moments, Emma also suggests playing rapid-fire vocabulary games with yourself during your downtime.
Category practice.
Right. You set a timer on your phone for 1 minute, and you force yourself to name as many fruits as possible. Apple, banana, orange, grape. Then you switch the category to verbs, action words like eat, drink, carry, walk.
The psychology behind the category game is about optimizing the brain's storage system. You want to build semantic networks.
Semantic networks.
When words are stored in heavily interconnected webs of related concepts rather than isolated flashcard silos, retrieval becomes significantly faster.
They're linked.
Yes. Firing the neural pathway for apple primes the pathway for banana, making it easier to access.
Okay, we are entering the final phase of John and Emma's methodology. We have the psychological framework, the physical conditioning, and the cognitive scaffolding.
The whole toolkit.
But the graveyard of language learning is full of people who understood all these concepts and still quit after 2 weeks.
It's sad, but true.
How do we translate this massive amount of theory into a sustainable lifestyle? How do we take action without burning out?
Their ultimate overarching advice is the implementation of what they call a tiny English moment.
The tiny English moment. It is the purest distillation of their entire philosophy, isn't it?
Absolutely. It requires abandoning the grand, sweeping resolutions and focusing entirely on microscopic consistency.
The directive is to design one highly isolated, incredibly short moment into your daily routine where English, or whatever your target language is the absolute only language permitted to exist.
It does not require you to block out an hour on your Google Calendar.
Yeah.
It does not require you to buy a new textbook. The source text suggests seamlessly grafting this moment onto a habit you already perform daily.
Like what?
It could be the 5 minutes you spend in the shower. It could be the physical walk from your front door to the bus stop. Or the 10 minutes you lie in bed staring at the ceiling before you fall asleep.
They bring it back to the breakfast example, which is so wonderfully mundane. Standing in your kitchen and whispering, "I'm hungry, I'm frying an egg. Oops, put too much salt."
It's a tiny, impenetrable bubble of immersion.
But Emma also offers another tip for creating a tiny moment that is incredibly modern and highly actionable, changing the operating language of your smartphone to English.
It is a forced immersion technique that yields massive dividends.
John actually laughs about this in the audio, admitting that when he first changed his phone settings, he spent 5 frustrating minutes just trying to figure out how to find the alarm clock.
I've been there.
But the payoff is undeniable. By changing the language of the device you look at 80 times a day, you are forcing direct contact with real-world, high-utility vocabulary.
You are no longer memorizing a list. You are interacting with the words out of sheer necessity.
Right.
You learn settings, storage, battery update, and delete because you physically need to execute those functions.
I think the real genius of the tiny English moment is how light it feels.
Light, yes, not heavy.
It completely bypasses the brain's resistance to heavy cognitive loads.
Right.
You do not have to overhaul your identity or sacrifice your free time. You just have to carve out one microscopic space.
It lowers the barrier to entry so drastically that the brain's usual excuses for procrastination simply evaporate.
It is the exact antidote to John's distraction story from earlier.
The old snack.
Right. When your goal is massive and unstructured, like I am going to organize my entire room and think in English for 4 hours, the cognitive load is so terrifying that your brain will look for any escape hatch, even if it's an old snack in a drawer.
But when your goal is simply, I am going to narrate frying this egg for exactly 90 seconds.
The brain says, okay, I can survive 90 seconds. And it executes the task.
And that concept of survival brings us to a profound psychological truth that John and Emma touch on near the very end of their dialogue.
Oh, this part blew my mind.
It's a revelation that challenges how we view personal growth in almost every area of life. We harbor a deeply flawed, backwards belief about the nature of confidence.
We treat confidence as a prerequisite.
We really do.
We tell ourselves, once I finally feel confident, then I will go to the language exchange meetup. Once I feel confident, then I will speak up in the meeting.
Exactly. We wait for the feeling to arrive before we take the action.
But the biological reality is that confidence is never a prerequisite. It is a byproduct.
Confidence comes after the action. Confidence is simply the residue of survival.
You literally cannot wait until you feel ready because readiness is a neurological illusion.
You must take the action before the confidence exists. You must open your mouth, stumble through the sentence, use the completely wrong verb tense, sound exactly like a tired potato, and survive the social interaction.
Yes.
It is the realization that the mistake did not kill you that generates the confidence to try it again tomorrow.
John strongly urges learners to initiate basic, low-stakes exchanges with human beings as early in the process as possible.
Don't wait for grammatical perfection.
Look at someone and ask, how was your day? What did you eat for lunch? Keep it anchored to the immediate reality. Save the deep, abstract debates about philosophy for 5 years from now.
Emma summarizes this entire journey with 2 words at the end of the text. Train gently.
Train gently. I love that.
I find that phrase deeply resonant. It is a reminder to be patient with the complex physical, emotional, and neurological adaptations your brain is being forced to undergo.
So what does this all mean? Let's pull all of these microscopic habits into a single cohesive strategy.
Let's do it.
If you want to bypass the coffee shop brain freeze and actually experience fluid thought, you have to systematically dismantle the red blocks. First, you uninstall the translation emulator.
Yes.
You stop passing every thought through your native language, and you forge direct contact between the English word and the physical reality it represents.
Second, you respect the effective filter by starting small. You anchor your initial practice to your immediate physical environment and your daily routines.
Master naming the objects on your desk before you attempt to explain the complexities of the universe.
Exactly.
Third, you reframe your relationship with fear. You embrace the emotional spike of making mistakes, knowing that the friction is the exact mechanism that glues the memory into your hippocampus.
You accept that silence is cognitive starvation. Say more, fear less.
Fourth, you acknowledge the physical reality of the sport. You practice shadowing to build the articulatory muscle memory of a flexible mouth, and you endure the psychological pain of recording yourself to capture objective data on your progress.
Fifth, you deploy cognitive scaffolding. You rely on the pre-compiled code as sentence frames, so you aren't building syntax from scratch.
And you master filler phrases to buy your prefrontal cortex processing time.
If you lose a word, you don't panic.
Yeah.
You elegantly ask for the machine for hot water.
And finally, you integrate the tiny English moment. You take microscopic action every single day, long before the illusion of confidence ever arrives.
You train gently, but you train relentlessly.
It is a complete paradigm shift. We are moving away from the passive, exhausting memorization of the classroom and stepping into active, physical, and psychological conditioning.
It is a remarkably powerful framework. And, looking at the totality of John and Emma's method leaves me with a final, somewhat provocative thought to consider, which expands on everything we've explored today.
I love a good paradigm-shifting thought. Let's hear it.
We have spent this entire deep dive dissecting the mechanics of how to force your internal monologue to operate in a completely foreign linguistic structure.
Right.
We are talking about deliberately changing the vocabulary of your private internal thoughts during that tiny English moment. And in the fields of linguistics and cognitive psychology, there is a long-standing theory that the language we use doesn't just describe our reality.
It actively shapes it.
It actively shapes the boundaries of what we are capable of perceiving.
Right. The idea that how you categorize the world dictates how you physically experience it.
Precisely. Different languages encode information differently. Some languages force the speaker to specify the exact source of their information in every sentence.
Really?
Yes. Other languages arrange time, not from left to right, but from east to west. English sentence frames establish cause and effect in a very specific linear way that might differ entirely from your native tongue. So if our internal monologue is the lens through which we view reality, what happens when we consciously carve out a piece of our day to think in a completely different operating system?
That is profound.
How does adopting that new linguistic architecture subtly shift not just how you ask for a cup of coffee, but the very way you perceive causality, time, and relationships in the world around you?
Does training your brain to think in a new language ultimately teach you to experience a slightly different version of reality?
Exactly.
You aren't just memorizing new audio files for the same old world. You are literally rewiring your brain to process existence from a new angle.
It's a huge shift.
That is a massive concept to chew on during your next tiny English moment. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. I hope this breakdown has fundamentally altered how you view the learning process, the utility of your mistakes, and the incredible compounding power of a 5-minute habit.
The neurological mechanics are all there, waiting to be utilized. It is simply a matter of initiating the action.
Take one small microscopic action today. Look around the room you are sitting in right now. Pick a single object, describe it out loud, embrace the chaos, be the tired potato, and see where the friction takes you. We will see you next time. Imagine you're sitting in this really high stakes boardroom.
Oh man, the classic pressure cooker.
Right. The air is just incredibly thick, your coffee is completely cold, and the CEO who literally holds your entire career in their hands, they just confidently pitched this strategy.
And let me guess, it's a disaster.
Oh, it's a total disaster. You know for an absolute undeniable fact that this plan is going to bankrupt the company within like 6 months.
Yeah.
You're staring at the projections, the math is just screaming at you, and now you realize you have to do the one thing nobody wants to do. You have to tell the boss they're wrong.
Which is terrifying.
Exactly. And how you phrase your very next sentence, that's going to dictate whether you're hailed as this visionary who saved the quarter, or if you're getting escorted out of the building by security with your stuff in a cardboard box.
It really is the ultimate tightrope walk, isn't it? Because in that specific moment, your heart is just pounding.
Oh, yeah. Palms are sweating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And your primal instinct is just to yell like, "Stop! That is a terrible idea!"
But you can't do that. And that's exactly what we're talking directly to about today in this deep dive. Because, having an opinion is the easiest thing in the world. We all have them.
We certainly do.
But actually expressing that opinion, doing it without causing a massive offense or, burning a vital bridge, especially when the stakes are just sky high in a professional or even a social setting.
Yeah, that's not just a skill. That is a high-level art form.
It totally is.
Yeah.
So today we are unlocking this sort of linguistic survival guide. We're mastering the art of diplomatic disagreement in English.
I love that you call it a survival guide because that's honestly what it is. I've seen so many people, even these brilliant high-level executives who communicate for a living, they just struggle terribly with this.
Wait, really? Even top executives?
Not all the time. Because when we face a disagreement, our default human reaction, it's not logical at all. It's physiological.
Yeah, it's physical, like a threat.
Exactly. We want to protect our viewpoint at all costs. And a really simple difference of opinion can just mutate into a full-blown argument in like 3 seconds flat.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is.
Yeah.
But I want to be clear right off the bat. Our goal in this deep dive isn't to teach you how to avoid disagreements.
Right. Because avoiding them is bad too.
Oh, it's terrible. Disagreements are vital. If everyone agreed all the time, innovation would just completely stagnate. The mission today is learning how to handle that inevitable friction with confidence, with respect.
And with the exact right vocabulary, so you can actually be persuasive instead of just combative.
Precisely. It's about persuasion, not victory.
I am just so excited about this because as we've been kind of combing through the research and all these advanced communication strategies for today's deep dive, it really hit me. We aren't just doing some basic English lesson here.
No, not at all.
We're looking at a literal masterclass in human psychology. Like, we're going to break down the behavioral strategies, the underlying neuroscience of conflict, and the very specific linguistic tools you need to just completely transform how you handle opposition.
And it really is a massive transformation.
Yeah.
Like when you finally learn how to separate the emotional heat of a moment from the intellectual core of a disagreement, everything just changes for you.
You stop being the bad guy.
Exactly. You stop being labeled as difficult or, argumentative, and instead people start seeing you as a leader. You become the consensus builder.
The person who can keep their cool.
Right. And the source material we're unpacking today does just this brilliant job of dissecting it all. We're going to move from the broad cultural psychology all the way down to micro expressions and the exact word-for-word phrases you should use the next time you're backed into a corner.
So to get there, we obviously can't just hand you a list of phrases and say, like, okay, good luck out there. We have to actually look at the root of the problem first.
We have to lay the foundation.
Right. Why do disagreements feel so incredibly confrontational?
Yeah.
And there's this massive hurdle here, particularly for those of you listening who, navigate English as a second, third, or even fourth language.
Yes. The translation issue.
Exactly. The sheer terror is that if you take how you would normally disagree in your native language and you just translate it directly into English word for word, you run the risk of sounding, completely unhinged, rude, or aggressive.
That directness trap is where so many brilliant professionals just completely stumble because cultures have these wildly different baselines for what actually constitutes respect.
Oh, absolutely.
Like think about certain Northern European or Eastern European business environments.
Yeah.
In a lot of those spaces, being direct and completely blunt is actually the ultimate sign of respect.
It's because you're not wasting their time.
Exactly. It means I value your time way too much to waste it with fluff. Here's the problem. Let's fix it right now. It's highly efficient.
But in English, especially in global corporate contexts, that is definitely not how the game is played.
Not even a little bit. There is this deeply ingrained, almost invisible emphasis on indirectness and politeness in English.
It's everywhere.
It is. So if you take a straightforward disagreement from a culture that really values bluntness and you translate it word for word into English, you aren't just translating words. You are actively violating this unspoken cultural contract.
Okay, the best way I can visualize this, and I was thinking about this earlier, is that disagreeing in a second language is basically like walking a tightrope without a net.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, because when you're arguing in your native tongue, you intuitively know the physics of that rope. You know exactly how far you can lean before you fall.
You know the limits.
Yeah, you know what tone of voice is going to land perfectly, when a slight smirk will soften the blow, when to take a pause. You have this massive, invisible safety net of shared cultural intuition.
But in English?
In English, you step out onto that wire, you translate your perfectly sturdy, completely reasonable native phrase, and snap.
The tension is completely wrong.
The tension is wrong, the rope breaks, the relationship fractures, and you're just falling, wondering what on earth just happened. Yeah. I mean, you used all the right words, mechanically speaking, but the whole thing just collapsed.
That happens because that safety net you're talking about, that net is context. And when you just rip the context away, the words actually become weapons, whether you intended them to or not.
That is so true.
If you look at the word confrontational itself, it describes behavior that's argumentative, hostile, or aggressively defiant.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the really crucial distinction we need to establish right now.
Okay.
The act of disagreeing is not inherently confrontational. It is the delivery mechanism that makes it feel that way.
Okay, let's unpack that delivery mechanism a bit, because I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
Is the English language, and I mean specifically corporate English, is it just inherently passive-aggressive?
I hear that criticism a lot.
I mean, are we all just kind of dancing around the issue, secretly too cowardly to just look someone in the eye and say, hey, this is a really bad idea? Because to an outsider, it often looks like this ridiculous amount of verbal gymnastics just to avoid stating a simple truth.
I totally understand that frustration.
Yeah.
I hear it from learners all the time. But that perspective actually completely misses what's happening on a neurological level.
Okay, so it's not passive aggression.
No, it really isn't. It's actually an incredible, functional, calculated strategy to bypass the human ego.
Bypass the ego.
Think about what happens in the brain during a disagreement. Let's say you look at a colleague and bluntly say, your idea is bad. They don't just process the logic of that sentence.
Right, they take it personally.
They do. Their amygdala, which is the part of the brain responsible for the fight or flight response, it lights up like a Christmas tree.
Oh, wow.
Their ego doesn't just hear the idea is bad. It hears, you are bad, you are incompetent. Your status in this tribe is actively being threatened.
Wait, really? So they literally experience a standard workplace difference of opinion as a physical threat?
Exactly. It's what psychologists call an amygdala hijack.
Amygdala hijacked. That sounds intense.
It is intense. And the very second that hijack happens, their prefrontal cortex, which is the logical reasoning part of their brain, it basically just shuts down.
So they literally can't even hear your logic anymore.
Nope. They are no longer listening to your data. They are entirely consumed with building a counterattack to protect their ego and secure their status.
That explains so many terrible meetings I've been in.
Right. So when we look at the English preference for indirectness, it's not cowardice. It is a highly sophisticated tool designed specifically to separate the idea from the person.
Wow. Okay, so by being indirect, you're basically sneaking past their brain security system. You're completely bypassing the guards.
That's a perfect way to put it. You are actively keeping the ego asleep so that the intellect can do its work.
That is fascinating.
If you frame the disagreement in a way that clearly telegraphs, hey, I respect you, your status is totally safe, but I'm just looking at this specific data point a little differently, you prevent those blast doors in their brain from slamming shut.
So that's the functional utility of being indirect.
Exactly. It's not about being fake or overly sweet. It's about engineering a safe psychological environment where ideas can collide with each other without the people colliding.
Man, that reframes it completely for me. It isn't about avoiding the truth at all. It's just about packaging the truth in a container that the other person's brain can actually accept without freaking out.
Spot on.
Which leads us perfectly to the very first line of defense. Because if bluntness is what triggers this amygdala hijack, how do we, disarm the bomb before we even bring up our opposing view?
Right. How do we start?
According to the source material, the strategy is this empathy-first approach. You literally have to soften the ground before you plant your flag.
And the absolute bedrock of that empathy-first approach is to acknowledge and validate.
Acknowledge and validate. Okay.
Before you even hint that you see things differently, you must explicitly prove to them that you understand their position.
Let's make this really concrete for people listening. Let's imagine a scenario.
Okay, let's say you're a CFO at a tech startup.
Okay, I'm the money person.
Yes. And the startup's visionary founder just excitedly proposed spending 80% of your remaining cash runway on a single massive Super Bowl ad.
Oh my gosh. Which, from a financial perspective, is literally suicidal.
Completely suicidal. So the blunt amygdala-triggering response would be to just say, we absolutely can't afford that. It's a terrible idea.
Which obviously instantly makes the founder think, well, you just lack vision. You're just a bean counter holding me back. And suddenly you're in this massive fight about vision and courage, not a logical discussion about cash flow.
Exactly. The whole conversation derails. So instead, you apply the empathy-first approach. You validate their underlying motivation.
How do I do that without agreeing to the ad?
You might say something like, I completely understand the drive to get massive, explosive brand awareness right now, and a Super Bowl ad would definitely do that. But looking at our 6-month runway.
So you've validated the goal, the need for awareness, before challenging the method, which is the ad itself.
Precisely. You're proving to their brain that you're on the same team. You're not an enemy.
It's all about these softening phrases. I love this joke we found in the research that really highlights how this feels. Imagine just walking up to a colleague at the coffee machine and saying, completely deadpan, I completely disagree with the shirt you wore yesterday.
I mean, even as a joke, if someone said that to me, you can physically feel your guard go up.
Exactly. It's just so incredibly jarring because it skips the softening step entirely. Even in a totally trivial context like clothing, blunt opposition feels like a physical shove.
It really does.
So instead, you need these phrases like, that's an interesting approach, or I can totally see why you'd prioritize that. I like to think of this strategy as your conversational shock absorbers.
Oh, the car analogy. I like this.
Right. Think about driving a car. If you're on a perfectly paved, smooth racetrack, you don't really need a heavy suspension system.
Sure.
But professional communication, it is full of potholes, deep craters, sudden drops. And a disagreement is a massive pothole in the road.
A huge one.
If you hit it at 60 miles an hour with a completely rigid frame, meaning you just use a blunt, direct statement, the impact is going to completely shatter the axle and everyone in the car is getting whiplash.
It's going to be a disaster.
But validation saying things like, I hear where you're coming from, that acts as the shock absorber. It absorbs all that kinetic energy of the disagreement so the car can keep moving forward without flying off a cliff.
It's a fantastic analogy, but I actually have to interrupt you right there because we have to be incredibly careful with how we tune those shock absorbers.
What do you mean, too soft?
Exactly. If your suspension is too soft, you lose control of the car entirely. You'll just sort of float off the highway.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens when people misunderstand validation and they take it way too far.
Oh, okay. This is exactly what I was wondering about when prepping for this, because if I'm just sitting there in the meeting, nodding aggressively, constantly saying, oh, I totally understand, or that is such a valid point, don't I run a huge risk?
The risk of them thinking you agree.
Yeah. Won't the founder just assume I'm fully endorsing the Super Bowl ad? Aren't we just muddying the waters and honestly being kind of deceptive in the name of politeness?
That is the exact trap so many people fall into. They oversoften out of fear, and their actual disagreement gets completely lost in the fluff.
So how do we fix that?
To avoid this, we really have to pull out our linguistic scalpels and dissect the vocabulary we're using. We need to establish a razor-sharp distinction between validation and agreement.
Validation versus agreement.
Yes. Validation simply means I hear you. Agreement means I align with you.
I hear you versus I align with you. That is a huge distinction.
It changes everything about the interaction. Let's look at the actual definition of the verb to acknowledge. To acknowledge something simply means accepting or admitting the existence or truth of a thing.
Right.
So when you acknowledge the founder's perspective, when you say, I see why explosive growth is your absolute top priority right now, you are just admitting that their priority exists and that it makes logical sense from their vantage point.
You're just saying your math checks out on your side of the table.
Exactly. You are proving that you actually listened instead of just sitting there waiting for your turn to talk, which is what most people do in arguments.
True.
But, and this is the absolute key, acknowledging their priority does not mean you agree it's the right priority for the survival of the company.
Oh.
You're just giving them the psychological relief of feeling heard. And honestly, human beings are desperate to feel heard.
We really are.
Once that core psychological need is met, their grip relaxes.
Yeah.
The amygdala calms down. And they're so much more willing to listen to your counterpoint.
Okay, so saying that's a valid point isn't conceding the argument at all. It's literally just saying, your logic tracks. I see exactly how you got from point A to point B.
Exactly. You're validating their reasoning, not endorsing the conclusion.
Okay, I absolutely love that. So we've installed the right shock absorbers, we've bypassed the amygdala security guards, we've validated their view without surrendering our own.
We've set the stage.
But now comes the actual pivot. How do we actually introduce our opposing idea without suddenly, throwing a brick right through their windshield?
This is where the real magic of diplomacy happens. We move from empathy first to what the sources call the collaborative pivot.
The collaborative pivot.
Yes, you validated them, and now you must introduce the friction. And the absolute best behavioral strategy for this, hands down, is turning your statements into questions.
Which, honestly, it feels like a superpower when you see somebody do it well in a meeting.
It genuinely is a superpower. Let's go right back to our Super Bowl ad scenario. The rigid statement-based approach would be something like, we need to use a different marketing strategy because this will bankrupt us.
Right. Very binary.
Exactly. It's binary. It's me versus you.
Yeah.
It's a brick wall in the middle of the room. But the pivot approach turns that exact same concern into an inquiry.
How would that sound?
You'd say something like, have you thought about how a Super Bowl ad will impact our cash flow in Q3 if the conversion rate ends up being lower than expected?
Oh, wow.
Or maybe, could we perhaps explore some alternative approaches that give us that high visibility, but without betting the entire 6-month runway on one day?
To build on the physical analogies we've been using, this feels like pure conversational Aikido.
Oh, I like that. Aikido.
Yeah, because in a martial art like Aikido, you never, ever meet force with force.
Right.
If someone throws a punch at you, you don't block it with your face, obviously, and you don't try to block it with a rigid brick wall. You take their forward momentum, you grab their wrist, and you gently redirect all that aggressive energy exactly where you want it to go.
Yes, you use their own energy.
Right. So when you make a hard statement like, we need a different strategy, you're putting up a brick wall. They're just going to smash into it and get mad.
Exactly.
But by asking a question like, have we explored alternative ways to get that visibility? You take their momentum, their intense passion for marketing, and you gently redirect it toward your financial concern.
You're guiding them.
You're turning an opponent into a co-investigator. Suddenly, you're not across the table fighting. You're sitting shoulder to shoulder on the same side of the table, looking together at the problem, rather than viewing each other as the problem.
Co-investigator is the perfect term for this. You are actively removing that adversarial dynamic. And another really crucial tool for this pivot is finding common ground, or utilizing partial agreement.
Partial agreement. How does that work?
You find the absolute smallest sliver of their argument that you can genuinely, honestly agree with, and you build your entire bridge from that one spot.
Okay, so that would sound like saying, I agree with you up to a point about needing a massive PR splash right now, but I am deeply concerned about this specific timeline.
Perfect example.
Or maybe, you've made a brilliant point about capturing the younger demographic. However, I think we really need to prioritize sustained engagement over just a one-time media event.
Exactly. You systematically isolate the variable where you align, and then you explicitly state the variable where you diverge. It's a deeply analytical way to speak, but it comes across as incredibly diplomatic.
But let me push back on this again, because I can literally hear the cynics in our audience rolling their eyes right now.
I'm sure there are a few.
Right. We're talking about all these delicate maneuvers, turning statements into questions, finding tiny slivers of agreement just to build a bridge. In a room full of seasoned, hardcore executives, isn't it insultingly obvious what I'm doing?
You think it feels contrived?
Yeah, like if I look at a CEO and say, could we perhaps explore alternative approaches? Doesn't literally everyone in that room know? That's just polite corporate speak for your idea is complete garbage and we're definitely not doing it.
Yes.
So doesn't this whole Jedi mind trick actually backfire by making me look, super manipulative?
They absolutely know what you're doing. Let's be clear about that.
Yep.
But here is the massive secret of high-level communication. They do not care.
They don't care that you're managing them.
Not at all. In fact, they appreciate it. Because it feels infinitely better than being attacked in front of their peers. It's not a deceptive Jedi mind trick. It is a mutually agreed upon professional courtesy.
Okay.
It works specifically because it shifts the outcome from a binary win-lose confrontation, which is embarrassing, to a face-saving collaboration.
Face-saving, I really want to dig into that concept because I feel like face-saving is essentially the invisible currency of the entire corporate world.
It is the currency of literally all human interaction. Think about the CEO whose idea you are systematically dismantling. If you bluntly say they're wrong in front of the board, their only options are to fight you to the death, to protect their fragile ego, or to publicly admit defeat and look incredibly weak to their team.
You've completely backed them into a corner.
You've trapped them. But if you say, have you considered how variable X might impact outcome Y? You give them an out, an escape hatch.
Oh, I see.
They can stroke their chin, look super thoughtful, and say, that's a very interesting variable. Let's explore that data. They get to totally change their mind without ever losing their dignity.
That is so smart.
That's what face-saving actually is. There's this wonderful idiom we use in English, to see eye to eye, which just means to agree. We often say, well, we don't see eye to eye on this.
Very common phrase.
Finding common ground allows two opposing parties to move forward and actually make a business decision, even if they don't see eye to eye on the entire picture. It's about recognizing that the shared goal, which is usually the survival of the company, is vastly more important than the temporary dopamine hit you get from winning an argument.
It's just the mutual acknowledgement that the relationship survives the friction. Okay, I'm completely sold on the Aikido method.
Glad to hear it.
But, and this is a massive but, there are definitely times when you can't just gently pivot, right? Like softening and questioning are phenomenal tools for Tuesday afternoon brainstorms. But what happens when you have to pull the emergency brake?
The really high-stakes moments.
Yeah. Say the CEO is literally about to sign the binding contract for that Super Bowl ad in 10 minutes, and your gentle questions just aren't working. Sometimes, diplomacy has to step aside for absolute clarity, doesn't it?
And that brings us directly to what the sources call the escalation ladder. Advanced communicators know that diplomacy absolutely has its limits. Sometimes clarity must override softness to avert a total disaster.
So how do you do it without getting fired?
Even when you are forced to escalate to directness, there is a strict protocol. You don't just start throwing verbal grenades across the room. You use what we call disclaimer phrases.
Disclaimer phrases.
Yes. These are specific linguistic markers used to literally warn the listener that a direct, blunt disagreement is inbound.
So it's like throwing up a massive flashing yellow caution sign on the highway right before a hairpin turn. Like, brace yourself, we're about to swerve hard.
Precisely. And we have to carefully categorize these by context. Formal versus informal.
Let's start with formal.
Okay, in a highly formal context, say you're dealing with a senior executive, a board of directors, or just an incredibly tense, high-stakes situation, the classic heavy-duty disclaimer is, with all due respect.
Oh, man.
Think of a tense military or corporate scenario from a movie. With all due respect, Captain, I believe your plan is completely unworkable. You are using this specific phrase to officially flag that you are stepping out of line to challenge authority, but you are doing it for the good of the mission.
With all due respect. I have to be completely honest with you. Whenever I hear that phrase in real life, my stomach just drops. It really feels like a verbal air raid siren. When you hear someone say, with all due respect, you instantly brace for impact because you know a massive, brutal critique is about to drop right on your head. In a way, it almost feels aggressive because it's just so incredibly loaded with tension.
It is a profoundly heavy phrase, which is exactly why it must be handled with extreme care. It is a literal emergency brake. It's best reserved for challenging someone significantly above your pay grade or when the situation is absolutely critical.
Right.
It's a formal invocation of protocol, so you use it in an informal context, it's totally disastrous.
Oh, I can imagine. If I'm just trying to decide where to get lunch with my best friends, and I look at them dead in the eye and say, with all due respect, I think getting sushi today is a terrible idea, they're going to look at me like I've completely lost my mind.
He'd probably laugh at you.
It's so stiff and weird.
Exactly. You'd sound ridiculous, and you'd actually create weird, awkward tension where there was absolutely none. So for informal contexts, like with peers, friends, or just in casual brainstorming sessions, you need much softer disclaimers.
Give me some examples of those.
You'd use phrases like, respectfully, I have to disagree with you on that one. Or just a simple, I'm really not so sure about that.
Okay, those feel much better.
Or even, I don't mean to be a roadblock here, but I see a massive potential problem. These phrases still warn the listener that friction is coming, but they don't sound the air raid siren.
Context is absolutely everything. You have to read the room. But there's a vital piece of this puzzle that we haven't even touched on yet.
Tone.
Exactly. We've talked endlessly about the words, the shock absorbers, the questions, the pivots, the disclaimers, but words are just data on a page. The delivery, and by that I mean your tone of voice, your pacing, your micro-expressions, your body language, that is the actual music.
The music versus the lyrics.
Right. And if the music doesn't match the lyrics, the whole performance falls apart. A calm, measured tone and open body language show respect, even when the words themselves are drawing a really hard line in the sand.
And this circles us all the way back to the amygdala hijack we started with.
How so?
Because you can deploy the most perfectly crafted, exquisitely diplomatic vocabulary in the English language. But if your tone is sharp, if your jaw is visibly clenched, if there's even a micro expression of contempt or sarcasm on your face, the listener's brain will instantly detect the threat.
The guards wake up.
Instantly. The ego goes right back on the defensive, and the brilliant words you just memorized are rendered completely useless.
Okay, so let me test the absolute limits of this theory.
All right.
If tone is truly that powerful, if the music is honestly more important than the lyrics, could I, theoretically, say something totally blunt, lacking all diplomatic vocabulary whatsoever? Like if I just say, your idea is absolutely terrible, but I say it with a really warm, gentle smile, a totally open posture, and the soothing, calm voice. Does the perfect tone magically erase the bluntness of the words? Can I get away with it?
Absolutely not.
No.
In fact, that is almost worse. Doing that creates profound cognitive dissonance for the listener.
Because your face is basically saying, hey, I'm your best friend, but your words are actively saying, I am assassinating your character right now.
Exactly. It doesn't come across as diplomatic at all. It comes across as deeply patronizing, condescending, or honestly, even psychopathic.
Yeah, it sounds a bit creepy when you put it like that.
It is creepy. The magic does not happen when tone replaces vocabulary. The magic only happens when diplomatic words meet a measured tone. Think of it as a lock and key mechanism.
Oh, I like this.
The diplomatic vocabulary is the physical key. But the calm, respectful tone is the turning motion that actually engages the lock and opens the door to constructive disagreement.
Wow.
One without the other leaves you completely locked out in the cold. You need the synthesis of both to successfully signal to their brain, I am attacking the problem on the table. I am not attacking you.
The lock and the key, that is brilliant. It just clarifies it so perfectly, which actually brings us perfectly into the final synthesis of this deep dive.
Let's do it.
We've covered the underlying psychology, the physical brain reactions, the behavioral strategies, and the delivery mechanism. Let's look really closely at the specific high-level vocabulary that ties this entire methodology together.
When you look at the source research and the actual transcripts of highly effective world-class communicators, two defining words constantly emerge: nuanced and diplomatic.
Let's define nuance for this context.
Nuance is defined as having subtle and complex differences in meaning or expression. Navigating a disagreement effectively is the ultimate exercise in nuance. It is never black and white. It's entirely about navigating the shades of gray, knowing exactly when to soften, when to pivot, and when you finally have to escalate.
And diplomatic, which literally means being skilled in dealing with people without causing offense. It's the ability to negotiate all those tricky gray areas without detonating the relationship.
Precisely. And out of all the linguistic tools we've analyzed today, there are two specific phrases that experts universally highlight as the absolute gold standard for polite, effective disagreement in English.
I have these heavily circled, highlighted, and underlined in my notes.
I'm not surprised.
The first one is, could I offer a different perspective? And the second one is, I see your point, but I wonder if... Let's really dissect these, because to me, they look like absolute masterpieces of linguistic engineering.
They really are masterpieces. Both of those phrases perfectly encapsulate everything we've talked about today.
Yeah.
The empathy-first approach and the collaborative pivot.
Yeah.
I think the second one, I see your point, provides the immediate validation to keep the amygdala totally calm. And then, but I wonder if, turns the harsh statement into this gentle, collaborative question.
It's so smooth.
It is. But that first phrase, could I offer a different perspective?
Yeah.
That is perhaps the single most powerful phrase in modern business English.
I look at these phrases kind of like a master carpenter's specialized tools.
What do you mean?
Well, if you're just doing rough construction like you're smashing up some old drywall or building a really basic backyard fence, you just use a heavy hammer and a crowbar. Blunt force gets the job done.
Sure.
But if you are building fine, intricate, incredibly expensive mahogany cabinetry, you do not swing a sledgehammer at it. You use highly specialized chisels, fine grit sandpaper, delicate calipers. These phrases we're talking about, like, could I offer a different perspective? These are the fine tools.
That's exactly right.
You don't use them to decide what to have for dinner with your spouse, but for a nuanced conversational finish. When the stakes are sky high and the relationship really truly matters, they are absolutely essential.
The carpenter analogy is so spot on. And let's look at exactly why could I offer a different perspective. Is the sharpest chisel in that toolbox. Let's break down the actual psychology of the individual words.
Okay, lay it on me.
By starting the sentence with could I, you are explicitly asking for permission. You are actively acknowledging their autonomy and giving them the power to grant you the floor. You aren't demanding their attention. You're requesting it, which flatters their ego.
And then the word offer. I love that. You aren't forcing an idea down their throat. You aren't imposing your will on them. You're giving them a gift. They can choose to take it or just leave it on the table.
Yes, exactly. And then the absolute crown jewel of the phrase, the word perspective.
Why is that word so important?
Because you are actively acknowledging that viewpoints are inherently subjective. You are not standing there saying, I have the objective, undeniable truth and you are dead wrong.
Right, which triggers the fight.
Exactly. Instead, you're simply saying, look, we are both looking at a multidimensional object in the center of the room. From where I'm standing over here, I just see a different angle. Let me show you what I see.
It just completely removes the ego threat.
Completely.
Yeah.
It perfectly balances total respect for their intellect with your own intellectual contribution.
So if you're listening to this right now, maybe driving to work, and you're prepping for a massive anxiety-inducing meeting tomorrow, and you can only fit one single tool in your pocket, that is the ultimate universally safe, get-out-of-jail-free card.
Absolutely.
Just say, could I offer a different perspective? But there's a catch here, right? Yeah. You can't just read that phrase on a piece of paper today, do nothing, and then suddenly deploy it perfectly in a boardroom shouting match tomorrow.
No. If you try that, it will blow up in your face. It will sound incredibly rehearsed, completely robotic, or even worse, sarcastic.
Because the music will be wrong.
Exactly. The delivery will be entirely wrong because you won't have the muscle memory in your jaw and your chest. You have to practice these precise phrases in low-stakes environments first.
Like where?
Try saying, could I offer a different perspective when you're just debating which software to use for a minor side project? Or when reviewing a low-priority document with a peer you already trust completely.
Just to get the words out of your mouth.
Right. You have to get the cadence, the micro-expressions, and the actual breathing into your body so that when the pressure is actually on and your boss is about to blow the entire annual budget on something stupid, the diplomatic response flows out of you entirely naturally without panic.
You literally have to build muscle memory for your mouth. I love that so much. All right, as we pull all of this amazing information together and wrap up this deep dive, let's just quickly crystallize the 5 core pillars of diplomatic disagreement that we've explored today.
Sounds good. Let's recap.
Pillar number 1, acknowledge and validate. Be the verbal shock absorber. Use phrases like, I see where you're coming from, to bypass those amygdala security guards and protect the other person's ego.
Essential first step.
Pillar number 2, soften your phrases. Never, ever state your opinion as an absolute, undeniable law of the universe. Swap out blunt force like you're wrong for, I'm not so sure about that.
The fine chisels.
Right. Pillar number 3, turn statements into questions. Use that conversational aikido. Instead of throwing up a rigid brick wall by saying, we must do X, gently redirect their momentum by asking, have we considered how X might actually impact us?
Turn them into co-investigators.
Love that. Pillar number 4, find common ground. Build a face-saving bridge by highlighting just a tiny sliver of partial agreement before introducing the divergence. Give them an out.
Yes.
And finally, pillar number 5, mind the music. Remember the lock and the key. All the brilliant, nuanced vocabulary in the world absolutely cannot save a tense, sarcastic, or aggressive tone of voice.
It is a profoundly powerful framework when you put it all together. And I really, really want to emphasize this to you, the listener. Mastering these 5 pillars is not just about expanding your advanced English vocabulary.
It's not a grammar test.
It's not a grammar exercise at all. This is a fundamental upgrade to your entire professional operating system. When you prove over time that you can handle friction with grace, when you can disagree fiercely about ideas without destroying the underlying rapport, people really notice that. You deepen your relationships, you signal to your colleagues, your managers, and your clients that you possess immense emotional intelligence. And most importantly, that you are totally focused on solving the problem, rather than just feeding your own ego.
It literally changes how people perceive your underlying character. It takes you from just being a participant in a meeting to being the undeniable leader in the room.
It really does.
So we're going to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought experiment.
Oh, I like these.
I want you to mentally travel back in time. Think about a specific moment in your past when a disagreement you had escalated completely out of control.
We all have one.
We really do. Maybe it turned into a shouting match with a partner at home. Maybe it resulted in weeks of icy silence with a colleague at work. Or maybe it permanently torpedoed a professional connection you really needed.
Picture the room.
Yeah, picture that exact room. Feel the tension in the air. Remember how your body felt. Now, if you could rewind the clock, step back into your own body in that exact fraction of a second and apply just one of the techniques we dissected today, say, bypassing their amygdala by finding one tiny piece of common ground to validate before launching your counterattack, how might the entire trajectory of that relationship have changed?
It's a heavy thought.
It is. Think about that. It just proves how much incredible, genuinely life-altering power is hidden in the subtle, nuanced choices of the words we use every single day.
It's been fantastic unpacking this.
It really has. That's all for this deep dive. Take these tools, build that muscle memory, and we'll catch you on the next one.